Jordan Finger sold freshly. Not flipped it, not merged it into oblivion, actually sold it and walked away with the kind of exit most founders only whiteboard about. He swears he's not building an erectile dysfunction brand, though he set up enough jokes this episode that you'd be forgiven for assuming otherwise. What he actually believes is stranger and more interesting. That the 50-year-old man is the last great untapped market in direct-to-consumer, and everyone's too busy chasing 25-year-olds to notice. This is the Adotat Show.
Welcome to the Adotat Show. Today, my guest is Jordan Finger. Full disclosure, I've known Jordan since the early 2000s. We once went on a debt collection run together, and that's how we became friends. Since then, he took Freshly from $5 million to $200 million before Nestle bought it for $1 billion, served as a chief growth officer of Nutrafol before Unilever acquired it, and now runs Noel Partners for fractional CGO for founder-led brands. He says the agency model is dead. He says the CMO role at the growth stage brand is dead. His Yoda is failure. Jordan, welcome back. Let's see if you're still collecting.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So you did a hedge on this one. You said, and I'll quote you, agencies are glorified execution shops running the same 2020 DTC playbook that stopped working years ago. Junior talent, no accountability, and zero skin in your income, on your outcome. And you won't live it there. You decide to twist the knife. AI is now doing the tactical work. Agencies charge a premium for you. You're essentially paying humans to do what $20 a month subscription can handle. That is a death sentence for the entire category. Can you walk me why you're this angry?
Yeah. I'm just not angry. I'm just a realist. So let's get into that. So it's very interesting because I've been on both sides of the equation. I started my career in digital as at an agency, and I worked on the brand side. So I've been on both sides of the equation. And there's definitely pros to what an agency offered brands at a time. And there still is value, but most of the kind of agency supporting your early stage, high growth, direct to consumer is definitely has a flawed business model. Because if you think about the economics, the agency is just charging a retainer. It's usually some founder that's a really good salesperson. They sell you on it and they're like, great. And the next, they got some 20-something-year-old that they just trained on Facebook ads like 6 months ago running a multi-million-dollar account. And then all they do is they give some report that they spit out from Meta and then like, here's your performance. There's no insights. There's no like partnership. So that's kind of why I say that. And then to the second part of it regarding AI is it really is eliminating a lot of that tactical work. So like what is the core value a lot of agencies brought was definitely around digital media. I mean, that's my background. I was a digital media buyer many, many years ago. I know very intimately. I even started when you were negotiating insertion orders, well before it became programmatic. But like, I don't know, 5 years ago, even still, definitely 10 years ago, platforms like Meta and Google were very archaic. They were not very systematized. They were difficult to understand and manage and optimize. There was a lot of day trading happening in these platforms. And now, in the last couple of years, everything's fully AI. And if you speak to anyone at Facebook or Meta, and they'll tell you like, hey, don't set an audience target. Don't do interest targeting. Don't do gender targeting. Give us great content. Give us the content that speaks to your persona, and the AI is going to find your audience.
Right.
I'll pause there.
And does it work?
So does it work? The reason, yes and no. Here's why it doesn't work. I'll start with that first. Because you're working with we'll say an older agency model, a lot of them are like, hey, we'll just make you a bunch of ads, right? And then we'll target with interest targeting. Well, that doesn't work anymore. So really what's happened, which is upon both the brands and the agency, is really to start with, whether you call it a persona, whether you call it an avatar, but really truly understanding who your audience is, right? Like who's your ICP, who's your ideal customer profile. That many brands don't even know. They're just like, hey, we sell this product, everyone can buy it. Great. And everyone's going to buy it if you have an everyone can buy it messaging. So it's really honing in on that messaging. And then within a given brand or product, you can have multiple personas, right? So let's just say it's a fitness program, right? Like how a 20-something-year-old is looking for a fitness program is very different than, let's say, someone that's 60 plus, right? They're just looking for mobility and longevity. Someone in their 20s trying to look hot. right? They're both personas. The product is still applicable, but if you don't have the messaging, then you miss the audience.
So you also said that what brands need is pattern recognition built over decades in the trenches. That is literally what you're selling as a fractional CGO. How is hire Jordan as your fractional CGO any different than hire an agency besides the fact that you're just one person?
Yeah. So I am a one person, but I do have a team behind me for you see them right here. Yeah, I have a team behind me. But no, in all seriousness, it's again, agencies traditionally are buying media, making ads. That's it. Maybe some strategy. What I
Right.
find is that,
Well, that's what they would say that's what they would provide is the strategy.
but they don't. They don't provide strategy. And I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So I currently work with a brand. They're a family-owned ranch in Wyoming. They
Right.
serve premium. They sell premium steaks, but they were trying to figure out how to better monetize the cattle. And part of that comes from the trim. That's the 80% that becomes like hamburger meat, et cetera, et cetera. So we launched a beef stick, very high margin, right? If an agency came and they're like, hey, yeah, we'll just run your ads. Where a growth officer or a growth strategist comes, it's like, no, let's sit down and look at the unit economics. Let me get your CFO on the phone. Let me talk P&L, cash flow analysis, projections, retention. Let me get your head of ops on the phone. Let's understand like margins and contribution margins and cost of goods and output and volume, right? Like those things are very key to really building the proper foundation of a brand. And an agency is just simply not going to do that. So does it have to come from
Do you
Jordan
think that
specifically?
silos have prevented this in the past?
I don't know if it was silos more so than there was a time where you could literally just run an ad on Facebook and it just worked because they had all that cookie tracking and they had all that third-party data pumping in, but those times have changed. So I don't think it's so much of a silo. I think what I do see is not every early stage brand are built the same, right? You have some that are just bootstrapping and they can't afford any of these services. Then you have another group that kind of bootstrap, but they got some momentum. So they have some resources and they're just like, oh, we need to hire an agency just to solve all this for us. Like we don't even know, right? So they don't even do the right vetting process. Then you have your more sophisticated brand where they've built the business, they have cash flow, maybe they even raised some capital, but now they need a real operator, right? So it's not that we use the term agency. I just think it's the old agency model that's broke and it really needs to be reinvented or repurposed. And my take is it has to be through this growth strategy perspective. It's not just, can you get me more customers through your ads? It's, can you get me more customers from your ads that are going to become repeat buyers, going to generate meaningful revenue and give me contribution profit margin to my bottom line.
So is the CMO ever useful anymore?
If last touch attribution worked, your waiter would get full credit for the meal. We make sure the chef gets credit too. Incremental.
Anymore? Or just not useful at the growth stage?
Yeah, so that's interesting. There's a lot of CMO, CGO. I know CGO is a bit more of a newer title out there, and CMO is still the traditional title. In fact, I did a post in December on LinkedIn saying the CMO is dead, and I branded something AMO, like AI Marketing Officer, and it got a lot of negative, press and backlash, which was great, and it really opened up conversation. I think there's a real threat that these traditional brand CMOs are feeling because their job was like, hey, let's make a brand book, let's do a deck, let's just show like all this great brand storytelling, but no real accountability to the numbers. So where I feel like the growth officer is more meaningful, if you're using that as like a title positioning, is they are getting into the economics, the revenue, the profits, the customer value, the contribution margins. Can a CMO do that? Sure. Again, that's semantics and title. I think it's ultimately like the operating behavior of that individual. And when
does a CMO ever become relevant? Is 10 million too early?
Yeah, that's I was going to get to that. So like, if we think about a traditional CMO at a later stage, 10 million is probably still light. I think when a brand is really becoming a multi-$100 million brand, it becomes relevant. Why? Because now they're probably multi-channel, omni-channel. So let's just say it's a beverage brand, right? They started D2C, now they're in grocery, now they're in chain stores. Now having that universal brand positioning, brand voice does become much more important because there's multiple touches with that consumer. There's multiple channels. Not everything's a direct performance attributed back to the advertising. So then like a more traditional CMO absolutely makes sense at a later stage. The other moment it makes sense is a lot of these brands, their goal is some sort of exit. So it's either to a strategic buyer, one in the category much bigger, like a Unilever, Nestle, etc., a PE group, maybe, and maybe they go public. People that have more of that traditional knowledge of like how to run a publicly traded company usually have more of that CMO pedigree. So it's not just can I steward the brands, but can I steward a C-level executive team and a board of, a chairman and public entity and public responsibility. So there is value. I just think there's a lot of confusion and misinterpretation of what a CMO does. And I think a lot of people get seduced by the title and they bring that type of person in way too soon into a brand.
So Freshly was 5 million to 200 million. Nutrafol, the number one hair growth supplement, which I guess you are not a customer,
No,
acquired by Unilever.
unfortunately, no. Yeah.
Those are amazing outcomes, but you were VP of Growth Marketing at Freshly, not a CGO,
Yeah.
and you were the CGO at Nutrafol, but the company already grew before you arrived. How much outcome was you versus the product, the market timing, and then the team around you?
Yeah. So Freshly, yes,
And
that
I know
was.
every growth marketer hates this question.
No, I don't hate the question. So, just in terms of title, I reported to the CEO. That was just the semantics, VP, whatever it was. I think that was also to the point I just made. Certain early stage brands kind of position titles based on, hey, if we do become a $300-400 million company, we need the flexibility to kind of hire that more traditional title. That's neither here nor there. So in terms of Freshly, all they had was like a basic website, no infrastructure, no team, no standard operating procedures, nothing in place. So forget the marketing, just operationally putting in a foundation into an operation that wants to scale is very important. And that is absolutely what I built at Freshly. And when Nutrafol was the same thing. Nutrafol's earlier growth was more around, which it did really well. They really worked their relationships with doctors. So for the first couple of years, they went to the doctor's office and say, hey, we got this great product. Can you carry it? They win the top derms, the top plastic surgeons, and they built the credibility out. And that business actually at one point when I started working with them was like the bigger part of their revenue. I was brought on board to really grow their whole direct consumer channel. So, we built the whole strategy around how to grow the .com, how to further build and grow Amazon. And that's what I built. So I built the foundation that they were able to continue to scale all of those channels on where they didn't have that in place originally.
Your target is $3 to $20 million brands in food, beverage, health, wellness, and supplements. Why that range and why those categories? Is that because the money is, or where the CGO gap is probably the most painful?
That's a great question. So let's address the latter part. I think it's, if we do that math, that's a company doing a couple $100,000 in revenue. So at a couple $100,000 in revenue, they have the ability to afford at least some sort of six-figure advertising and marketing budget. And still at that stage, if they're really just primarily a direct-to-consumer.com e-com brand, they're really relying still heavily on the digital advertising space. And the algorithm, like we touched upon, needs a lot of content, ad content to really work with and work around. So budget is not the desire just to spend budget. Budget becomes your tool to get the data set into the market to get the feedback loop as quickly as possible, right? So if you have 5 pieces of ad creative all around one persona, what are you really learning? What if you had 50 pieces of content and each one of those is a different persona? All of a sudden, the magnitude of learning and data becomes really meaningful. And that's why you need the budget. Revenue is really just an attribute of the ability for that brand to have the right budget to invest. So that's where I feel it starts. In terms of the other part of the equation of like, is that where a CGO is needed? Again, let's forget the CGO title. Let's just call it a growth operator or growth strategist. I feel that someone that's achieved 3 to 20 million, they figured a lot of stuff out, but a lot of them kind of start stalling, right? The ads aren't scaling it as efficiently. Their acquisition costs have gone up. Maybe their lifetime value is not as strong as they thought it was. And right. And it's at that point that they really start taking a hard look at the business. And again, using the beef company as an example, that company was, already getting to, they were at 5-6 million. We got it up to 12 million in a few months. But when we did that, we shifted them into a more profitable piece of their business. So it took someone with that growth mindset, that partnership in terms of the business economics to step in, work with the C-level executive team, identify the opportunity, and then back to the revenue and the budget, have the right financial resources to invest in that opportunity.
So we're going to move on to 5 people on a desert island. And Bear Grylls probably hates me because everybody picks him. Literal Yoda for perspective and Jedi mind tricks. Your dad, because we don't always agree because he's been a mentor. Anthony Bourdain to make the experience feel alive, and I assume to cook. Esther Perel, because you did an event with her years ago and she has incredible understanding of people. That is the most emotionally intelligent desert island answer ever from a growth marker. So your dad, I found this interesting. We don't always agree, but he's been a mentor for a lot of ways, and that dynamic would matter. You also said your Yoda is failure, not a person, but then you brought your dad to the desert island. Is your dad the Yoda you don't want to admit?
That's also an interesting perspective on that. No, back to the who is my Yoda. It's not a reflection of actually any of those folks. It's really more just a reflection on myself. And like I kind of, when I look back on that point of view of like who is my Yoda, it made me really look and reflect. And I would say the mentorship starting with my dad was he was a serial entrepreneur, was in a lot of businesses, had his own ups and downs. And from that, that's what I learned. I learned like kind of like entrepreneurship is not always glamorized, or it's not always the glamour reality that we see in the headlines. And everyone's driving around in yachts, right? So I think that humbled me in terms of that mentorship and understanding. It also showed me the possibilities of like creating your own destiny, having your own freedom, not being kind of capped by like a boss saying, "Hey, Jordan, great job. Here's $10,000 more." Right. And therefore, on the flip side of that is also the failure component. Right. So to achieve and find those successes, we have to be able to go through the painful failures throughout. And, you see that in sports, right? Like that's usually an easy way to reference. So to me, like yourself, at a young age, we both took this kind of leap to jump into this like internet thing when people are like, well, that's just where you get the news. That's where you get an email.
Right.
That's not an industry. That's not a business. People like you're in your 20s, go work for, a big bank, a big accounting firm.
I got a lecture from like a major advertising company when I wanted to make an ad network at 19. And it was go work at an agency.
Yeah.
So no, you can't do this. You have to have all this 20 years experience.
Yeah. So, right, they were wrong. And then you and I, but we were trailblazers. And like yourself, not everything we put out there worked. But, you asked earlier why that category. And I mentioned supplements because one of the businesses I had started in my late 20s happened to be a supplement business, my own branded products. And this was before there was Shopify and Google and Meta and all the wonderful tools and platforms we have today. This was 25 years ago. And somehow with all of that limitations, I found a way to make it work. So I feel like in a lot of ways, the hardships that you and I went through and the failures we experienced and the setbacks it caused us, one, it built our character. And back to the point on character, pattern recognition, I think that's where the pattern recognition comes from. But also I feel like whether it's touted in the news, I feel like now you see all these like Grunz, like GRUN, they just sold for $1.2 billion and they started 4 years ago. What is it? It's a supplement company, right?
Like I thought it was a marijuana company. Grun.
No.
With a double
GR, UN. Yeah. It's a gummy company.
GRON with I think means green. And
yeah, no, this is Grunz, I think they pronounced
Swedish.
it. But it was, they started a few years ago and they just sold, I think, Unilever 1.2 billion, right? So if you think about, okay, that's awesome. But like they were not able to do that today if guys like you and me weren't trailblazing all those years ago. So that's why I feel like my Yoda was failure, because without the failure, I wouldn't be able to understand myself, my business, my strengths, my weaknesses. And, it also builds a lot of character, right? Personally, I overcame a divorce. I had to file bankruptcy, a personal bankruptcy that I had to dig my way out of. And, these aren't like proud moments of my life, but they're just my reality. And I feel like those setbacks, both personally and professionally, gave me the strength and understanding and really kind of stripping it down to the core of who I am. And I feel like today, because of that, I'm just a better human being. I'm a better businessman. I'm a better friend. I'm a better son. I'm a better dad. So all of that character building happened because of my.
So Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
He'd make the whole experience feel alive, not just about survival. Bourdain is gone.
Yes.
And the way you described your pick was not about the food. It was about making an experience feel alive. Is that how you approach business too? Not just the numbers, but the aliveness of building something?
Yes, 1,000%. So in relation to business, I realized that I'm kind of a startup junkie. I love knowing that hey, here's something that nobody knows about, but with your knowledge and our resources and collectively working as partnerships, this could become a household name brand, i.e. Nutrafol, Freshly, things like that, right? Like that part's the exciting part. Sure, we want to be compensated along the way, however that compensation comes about, but that's what's exciting. And like I'm working on a project right now. I can't disclose who it's with, but it's with a massive global celebrity and personality. And they brought me in as their chief growth officer for the project. And we're doing a massive launch that will happen this summer. So it's just super exciting. Because if that all goes with my leadership and my stewardship and me wrangling this team, bringing something to life around a global brand so that everyone recognizes like that's exciting, right? Like that's super cool. And next you know it, it's in, Costco and Target and all these stores nationwide. Like that feels great. So like that's kind of really what fuels my growth personally and professionally. And yes, like I said, we don't work for free. I'm not a not-for-profit, but that's not the main driver. And then on the flip side, it's a lot of times it's brands that you've worked with that you've done a great job for. And for whatever reason, like they're comfortable just being like, hey, we're good being $1 million business. We don't want to be 100 million. And that's cool. I think professionally, personally, I sort of outgrow some of that clothing at some point because it's like, hey, I can't be a teenager forever. We have to grow up to be an adult. And then when I have these opportunities with brands that are like, hey, we're about to go on a rocket ship. You want to strap in? I'm like, hell yeah.
So you went from New York City to North Carolina. Is that a Bourdain move?
That's an interesting perspective. Definitely not a Bourdain move. Definitely not. I mean, before I answer that, I do travel extensively in most given years. Probably, I have a tracker. I think in any given year, I'm flying on average 2 times around the world in miles. Forgot what that math is off the top of my head. So I do travel a lot, and that kind of is my curiosity that Anthony Bourdain always kind of intrigued me with his shows and the fact that he would go off the beaten path and he would talk to locals and it wasn't just going to the tourist place, all of that, which I guess also ties back to the business point of like growth. It's the novelty, right? Like taking something that doesn't exist and the novelty of it and making it something really tangible is exciting. And I think that's what fueled the Bourdain part in me. But back to the question. Yeah, I mean, I'm born and raised in New York. I lived in Manhattan for 25 years. For me personally, post-COVID, working remote, video conferencing, becoming more and more, I realized that it just wasn't my place anymore, right? I have no more clients in New York City. My staff is all virtual. I do video calls or I hop on a plane. So I was like, you know what? I'm ready for a shift and change in lifestyle and in my life. My folks had moved down to North Carolina by the beach called Wilmington. So it gave me an opportunity to be closer to them and to live a different lifestyle. And really been embracing it. There's a local school here that I've been doing mentoring for some students. I'm very active in a local entrepreneur program, mentoring some local business owners, and I'm actually been presenting at the local American Marketing Association chapter event next Thursday.
On Bear Grylls, you said you're not going to try to prove that you can survive. You want him to keep you alive. That seems like Bear Grylls might actually be the spirit animal of the CGO. You don't need to be the hero. You need to be the person who's done before. Is that how you pitch yourself?
No, not really.
Well, now you can.
Basically, yeah. I mean, like with that choice, and like you said, it seems like it's a default obvious one. Obviously, he's done a great job building his own personal persona and profile, and we all reference him as the survivalist. I think a lot of it is that, like I just described, my career feels a lot of times it's a survival mode, and being in
Right.
survival mode can be very tiring at times. And sometimes you just want to be like, you know what? I trust you. You got this. So it doesn't necessarily really tie back to my CGO persona per se. I think it's more in line with a personal persona of like, I'm at a stage in my life, like I don't always have to be the person here. If someone else has figured out this stage and they're better at it than me, great. Like you lead the way. I'm on board. I trust you. So that's kind of why I chose that, more on a personal than a professional perspective.
So the company you started at 25, that was the supplement company?
Yes.
And what did the failure teach you that Freshly and Nutrafol could not have taught you?
Yeah. So a couple of things. Both those companies had outside funding, and there was no, when we were doing this back then, there was no venture capital in like D2C brands and stuff. Maybe some technology and some advertise, but nothing on the consumer product side. That just didn't exist. What I learned was as good as things are at any given moment, it all can turn against you at a flip of a dime. I learned that you can never have too much extra capital sitting in a bank account, ideally not through a debt instrument, but through an equity partner or your own, or if you're fortunate enough to build up your own cash flow, just to have a big reserve. I think that the setbacks that I experienced were just didn't have, my pockets weren't deep enough at that moment for various reasons. And if I had the capital that was sitting in the bank account and I could kind of weather the storm, I do actually think that was a business I would have sold and probably be having a different conversation today. So I wouldn't have learned that. And again, I was the owner. I was the entrepreneur. I was the one making all the decisions. So it gave me that opportunity to be right or wrong on a lot of things. When you work at a company, you're an employee, right? You have a lot of say, you have a lot of influence, but ultimately it's your boss that agrees or disagrees and makes that call. And so even those chapters were really exciting, I still look at myself mostly as an entrepreneur. Like I touched upon earlier, I don't like the idea that I can't make that final decision. However, which is in my notes also, that's why, like, for me, what makes it nice when you are running yourself more as like a growth strategist versus, hey, I have to sell this big overhead agency and cover all these salaries. And I have this kind of more like tight, like kind of like SEAL team approach that I'm able to be more selective with the clients. I'm also able to give them more of my time. And then lastly, I'm able to find kind of those CEOs and founders that do align with my values, professional, personal values. And therefore they do respect what I say to them. Because what I find when you're kind of like just the agency, it becomes a little bit of a churn and burn model, and you don't really have a vested interest. And the vested interest is important because, like I said earlier, that ultimately it's about building a great company with great economics, and then with that, maybe you're building a great brand that maybe has a fabulous exit, or maybe it's just a well-known brand around the country, the world, etc.
So you keep on coming back to the phrase pattern recognition. It's this thing that
Yes.
you sell. It is a thing that you feel that AI cannot replicate. Define it. What is pattern recognition, DTC growth? Give me an example of
Yeah.
seeing a pattern that a first-time founder might miss.
Sure. So pattern recognition, to what you gain with experience, however you get your experience, is that you've played the game a long time. You played the game across a lot of different entities and companies and partners, and you've seen what works, what doesn't work. And that's where the pattern recognition happens. So really what you're bringing to the table is you're eliminating kind of failures that somebody might necessarily step into. So if we use that like with a founder might come in and say, hey, I want to go and I'm going to build my whole business by boosting my content on Instagram. And I would say that's a horrible mistake because that's not going to do anything for you. Like, no, you have to build your followership, right? So like maybe not the best example, just one that came to mind. And it's really like, no, you have to build a strategy. We have to build our personas. Like there's a whole media marketing strategy plan that has to be put in place to make that company successful. So if you skip that and you just go to an agency like, hey, we made you a bunch of pretty ads because that's what you asked for, like, great, they look pretty. And then they don't work. And then the founder of their bootstrap was like, hey, I just burnt X of my own dollars that I'm not getting back. Or if they're venture funded, they're telling the board like, hey, we just burnt $100,000 in something that didn't work. But if you bring in somebody that has this, we'll call it, as you referenced, recognition, we're going to increase the odds that they're going to make better decisions based on things that
Can one
we
argue
know
that's
work.
what AI is actually best at doing?
Yeah, and that's where I was great segue, because that's where I was going to go with this. So AI will take what I just described and now amplify it. So AI at this point is still like data in, data out. If you give it bad data in, you're not going to get good data out. And I've seen this. I've had clients like, hey, I just pulled this report for Claude. It says everything's horrible. I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand the 10 things within that got to this point, and you took a slice of something within a 7-day period. We have to look back on a 3-month, right? So it's not the human being as an individual, it's using these tools as an extension of how you approach business. And so I 1,000% use AI in everything I do. I use chat, use Claude, I write code, I have agents. And really what it does is it really becomes like my brain on superpower, right? Like it's
So
my ability.
what exactly does your stack look at? Because one of your points you made in the interview was that for $20 or $5,
Yeah, $100,
$100
whatever.
total,
Yeah.
you could replace a CMO.
You could, I don't know if
You mentioned you could replace a CMO for $20, an agency for $20. Sorry. And I assume it's not just one thing. So let's just make it a stack of 5. So for $100, what would that be?
Yeah. So for $100, so when I say that, so let's run through a couple obvious ones, right? You grab Claude at $100 a month. That's like the premium package right now, unless you're going to do actual development code, right? $100. You have a copyright partner. You have a strategist partner. You have a design partner. So you just built storyboards, tone of voice, and potentially a marketing strategy, all with $100 when you have the right thought leader sitting down and putting in the right inputs to get you out the outputs that are needed. Now, 10 of us can line up and put their own inputs, right? But if you don't know where to start and you have 10 different approaches, one of those from the person that's done this without AI is most likely going to work. So like Claude, definitely, like I've been using Claude more the last month just because I think they've really jumped ahead on
Well, you
the
need it.
business.
You got to know what to ask.
Well, yes, right. You need to know
One
what
thing Claude
to
doesn't
ask.
do is tell us what to ask.
Correct. So that's back to your point. Where do you need the human? So like forget titles. You still need a thought leader, whether they have a branding background or growth background, right? Like you still need that. So where it replaces the agency is maybe you don't need the copywriter. Maybe you don't need the designer. Maybe you don't need even the PM. There's a lot of people you don't need to like make something great. And that's kind of where I'm using the stack. So for instance, on this brand that I'm working on right now, I very much consolidated all of the content that other people had put together on this client, on this brand. I looked at all the transcripts that were all recorded. I looked at all the investor decks and brand decks that have been provided so far. And from that, I was able to go and build a very thorough go-to-market strategy. That when I presented it, besides the client officially signing off on everything just yet, they're basically like, there wasn't like poking tons of holes. If anything, it just opened up new conversations for additional things. So like, and ultimately that was my thought process, but that would have taken me weeks to build versus hours. It still took me hours and days to build it and refine it. And not only just thinking it from my perspective, where Claude Code helps is like, hey, now this is the person that I'm going to present this to. This is their background. This is their bio. Read it through their eyes, poke the holes in this and tell me. I'm working with another client on raising money right now, right? Same thing. I said, all right, here's our investor deck. Read this as if you're a VC analyst and you're looking at this deck for the first time. Where are the holes? Where are the flaws? What do we need to adjust? I couldn't do that as a human being. I can't be all of those people, right? So now I can have this thought leadership with me and working with me to really refine it to the best of my ability. But ultimately, we're still at the point with AI that human beings still have to deliver that message, communicate that message, sell the confidence, build the trust. That's still the human capital where the market is today.
So rapid fire, whatever comes to mind first, best direct-to-consumer brand in the market right now that nobody's talking about.
Best consumer brand in the market right now that nobody's talking about. Wow, Meriwether Farms. They're my client.
Worst DTC trend that needs to die.
The thought that you just throw up ads on Meta with $100 a day and you just become $1 million business in 30 days.
Freshly or Nutrafol, which exit are you most proud of?
Freshly.
So your book's premise is with $100 a day. Did you write that once?
That was the book premise.
What?
The book is really a 101, right? It's a fundamental book. It's not how to become $1 billion brand. It's hey, I'm going to launch a coffee brand. I have no clue what any of this stuff is. Can you start learning with $100 a day? Absolutely. Are you going to build
What brand would you launch then? What if you had $100 a day?
What brand would I launch? Back to like what you asked me, like my personal preferences, food, beverage, health, wellness, supplements, vitality, like that seems to be my track. So if I were going to launch a product again right now, I'd probably do something that I relate to as a man of my age and my stage of life. I would do something about
There's too many jokes here.
Too many jokes, especially the last name Finger. But that aside, I would launch it. I would do a middle-aged man focused supplements. What it is, I have ideas, but I'm not going to.
So erectile dysfunction. Okay.
Definitely not erectile dysfunction. Actually not. No. I mean, for me personally, no, that would not be it because there's plenty of that and there's plenty of RX stuff that does a good job. No, I mean, like with my move, I dialed in my my working out, my diet. I lost weight. I've gotten stronger. My endurance has gotten better. All my blood work got better. So like, there's real things beyond, sexual health that are important to a man, right? Like you have to have energy, you have to chase around kids, you have to be able to like work and then go be social, right? So there's more things than just sexual vitality. It's just overall health vitality. And the premise and the thought of yesteryear that like, hey, a man in his 50s is done. I disagree. I think there's a huge chapter that's being unlocked right now. You're seeing a lot of the social media content more and more. This whole middle-aged man that's being ignored. I think there's a real opportunity to really give them the tools, whether it's knowledge-based, fitness-based, eating-based, supplements, etc. I think there's a really untapped opportunity. So I would do something in D2C in that category and start it with $100 a day.
Last question. One sentence you want every $5 million direct-to-consumer founder to hear.
That if you truly want to become a $20 million plus brand with the opportunity and the ability to potentially raise capital and to fulfill your hopes and dreams and maybe seeing a really big exit in the hundreds of millions plus, then we should be talking.
Thank you, Jordan. What the audience should know is that you have the exits, whether or not they agree with you, and you have the scars and the stubbornness that could cost him time early on and made him everything you're now. And that's worth listening to.
So there it is. A man who sold freshly, kept the stubbornness, and thinks there's a whole chapter waiting to be written for the people the market gave up on. Thanks to Jordan for the sermon. Thanks to Troutman Amin LLP, the ones who read the law so the rest of us can sleep, and to Incremental.com, who believe growth should be measured, not manifested. And thanks to you for listening all the way to the end, which is where the honest people always are. This has been The Adotat Show.
We're the publication of record for the people with the money. ADOTAT, and we aren't done. We aren't done. We're just getting started. No intimidation. We aren't scared. We are here, and my voice is clear. Oh, my voice.